The cold wind of the north howled across Winterfell's walls, carrying with it the smell of snow and death. Jon Snow stood at the war table, eyes locked on a rough map marked with stones and sigils. He wasn't alone this time. Beside him stood Jaime Lannister, the king's lair no longer golden and proud, but weary and honest. Across from them, Daenerys Targaryen's sharp violet eyes scanned the map with the same intensity. For once, the Dragon Queen wasn't alone in her decisions. "I've lost too many battles to stubbornness," Jon finally said, his voice low. "We need to think this through together. No more last-minute charges, no hidden plans." Daenerys nodded, her silver hair braided tightly behind her. "The Night King is no fool. If we treat this like just another war, we lose." Jaime leaned in, his golden hand glinting in the firelight. "He doesn't fight for pride or power. He fights for silence. And silence spreads fast." The mood was tense, but not hostile. They were three people who had lost too much: siblings, lovers, armies, and now, standing together, they knew that only unity could bring any chance of victory. Jon looked at Daenerys. "We use your dragons carefully. No more rushing into the sky. We protect them. Bran can help. He sees more than we do." "I'll not lose another child to the Night King," Daenerys said sharply. "Rhaegal and Drogon will strike only when we control the ground. No more flying blind." "And what about Bran?" Jaime asked. "He's the bait again?" Jon's jaw tightened. "No, not this time. We're not offering him up like a gift." They spent hours at that table, discussing every possible move. Gendry worked on reforging dragonglass weapons. Tyrion offered strategies, though he spoke less these days, perhaps humbled by his recent failures. Arya trained the soldiers. Sansa stayed sharp, managing supplies and morale. But the real planning happened in that quiet room, where three of the most powerful minds in Westeros did something rare. They listened. That night, as the candles burned low, Jon stood on the battlements and looked out at the snowy fields beyond Winterfell. Somewhere in the shadows, death waited. The Night King hadn't struck yet, and that was worrying. He was planning something. Jaime joined him quietly. "You know," Jaime said, "I once thought honor was enough to save a kingdom." Jon gave a small smile. "And I thought love could unite it." "And her?" Jaime asked, gesturing toward Daenerys' chambers with a nod. "I don't know," Jon admitted. "She's lost more than we can imagine. And yet, she still stands." Jaime looked thoughtful. "She has fire. You have ice. If the two of you can agree on something, maybe there's hope after all." The next morning, the three met again. Daenerys had an idea that shook the table. "What if we split our forces?" she said. "Let the Night King think Bran is still the key, but we hide our real strength. A trap within a trap." "Too risky," Jon said at first. "But if we hide some Unsullied inside the crypts and let the dead come in, they'll be ambushed. We'd need Arya's help," Jaime added. "And maybe the Hound. That many bodies moving underground. It's chaos." They started building a new Plan 1 with layers and traps, like a spider's web. For the first time in a long while, there was no shouting, no power struggle. Just focus. Winter was already here, but for once, so was unity. Snow fell heavier now, thick and silent, covering the world in white as if it tried to hide the coming horror beneath a peaceful blanket. But inside Winterfell, the storm was already brewing of steel, fire, and desperation. The new strategy had started to take shape. Bran was no longer a helpless lure. This time, he would use his powers to track the Night King's moves, forging into ravens, watching from above. But more importantly, he had warned them of something unexpected. "He doesn't want just me," Bran had said, his voice flat, eerie, almost not his own. "He wants legacy. He wants to erase memory. That means Daenery as ... Jon ... Even Jaime. You've all become part of history. You've changed it." That warning changed everything. Daenerys stood atop the walls now, looking down at the preparations with narrowed eyes. She wasn't just a queen, she was a weapon. But for the first time, she felt doubt clawing at her chest. Rhaegal flew above, circling slowly. Drogon rested in the courtyard, massive wings folded like the calm before a storm. She turned as Tyrion approached. "You think this will work?" "I think," Tyrion said, folding his hands behind his back, "that you working with Jon and Jaime might be the only thing that can." "And if we fail?" she asked. "Then at least you won't burn alone." Below, Arya tested her new weapon, a spear, tipped with dragonglass, designed to come apart into twin blades. Gendry had made it for her, and though his hands were bruised and burned, he beamed like a child every time she trained with it. "I've killed many men," she whispered to the weapon, "but killing death itself. Let's see if you're sharp enough for that." Meanwhile, Jaime was in the armory, strapping on blackened armor. He moved slower now, his golden hand a constant reminder of the past he couldn't change. Brienne stood beside him, silent, watching. "You sure about this?" she asked. "No," Jaime replied, "but I'm tired of running from the things I regret. If I'm going to die, let it be for something real." Jon walked through the halls with Ghost padding beside him, quiet as a shadow. He passed Sam, who was reading furiously, eyes wide behind tired glasses. "There's something about Valyrian steel," Sam muttered. "It doesn't just kill the dead. It sings to them, like it remembers." Jon didn't stop. He knew too well now that answers didn't always come from books. They came from blood and choices. Night was falling. They had one day, maybe less. The final battle was close. Outside the gates, trenches had been dug and filled with oil. Archers lined the walls. Unsullied stood in rows, calm, unshaken. The Dothraki, what remained of them, had taken their place behind, their blades now lined with dragonglass. But the real twist of the plan lay within the crypts. Everyone thought they were safe, the old, the weak, the children. But now it was a trap, a death trap. Arya, Podrick, Grey Worm, and a few dozen silent fighters waited in the dark, ready. If the Night King sent the dead to rise inside the tombs, they would be met with fury, not fear. "We don't win by strength alone," Jon had said in the final war meeting. "We win by surprising him. He expects fear. We give him fire. He expects Bran alone. We give him all of us." At night, just before dawn, the sky turned blue with frost. A cold wind blew across the field. Ravens scattered from the trees. The dead had come. Jon, Daenerys, and Jaime stood together at the front gates. They didn't speak. There was no need. Everything they had, every part of who they were, was now part of this battle. This time, they didn't just plan together. They would fight together. The horns of Winterfell sounded deep, long, and terrifying. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a declaration. The enemy was here. Jon Snow stood at the front lines, longclaw in hand, the Valyrian steel gleaming faintly darkness. He could see them now, figures in the distance, moving slowly, like shadows made real. The dead didn't run. They crept. Thousands upon thousands, stretching into the night like a river of bones and silence. Beside him, Jaime Lannister tightened his grip on his sword. His breath steamed in the cold. "Never thought I'd be standing next to a Stark, defending the North," he muttered. Jon didn't glance at him. "You're not. You're standing with the living." Up above, Daenerys sat atop Drogon, watching the endless horde from the sky. Rhaegal hovered beside them, wings beating like thunder. For the first time, she didn't charge. She waited. From the crypts, Arya looked up as the ground above began to rumble. She could feel it, the march of the dead. But she wasn't scared. Not this time. "Let them come," she whispered, gripping her weapon tighter. "We'll show them what waits in the dark." And then it began. The front lines clashed with the dead in a storm of screams, metal, and broken bone. The Unsullied held their ground, shields locked, spears stabbing forward. Jon was everywhere, cutting through whites like a man possessed, his blade glowing with silent fury. Jaime fought harder than he had in years. His golden hand was nearly ripped off twice, but he held firm. Every time he swung his sword, it was like he was cutting through guilt itself. In the sky, Daenerys finally gave the command. Dracarys. Drogon unleashed a torrent of fire, lighting up the field like daylight. Whites turned to ash in an instant, their screeches vanishing in the roar of flame. Rhaegal followed, strafing the flanks. But then the air grew colder. Bran, watching through the eyes of 1,000 birds, saw it first, the Night King, riding his undead dragon, Viserion, cutting through the clouds like a nightmare. "He's here," Bran said, his voice echoing in the war room even though his body sat still near the godswood. "He's coming for Jon and Daenerys." Above, Viserion screeched and spat blue fire across the battlefield. Drogon swerved to avoid it, and Daenerys nearly fell from the saddle. For a second, panic gripped her heart. Rhaegal moved in to help, but Viserion was too fast. Jon saw the dragon in the sky, and his blood ran cold. "We can't lose the dragons," he shouted, trying to push through the chaos to the rear. Suddenly, the ground trembled. From within the crypts, a deep, unnatural sound echoed. Arya turned sharply, and then it happened. The ancient tombs cracked. Bones began to shift, centuries of dead Starks rising. The Night King had reached deep, deeper than anyone expected. Screams rang out in the dark tunnels. Children, the elderly. Even Sansa, who had gone down to comfort them, found herself surrounded by rattling bones and crawling hands. But Arya didn't run. "Now," she yelled. Hidden doors opened, and unsullied warriors burst into the crypts, weapons drawn. A brutal battle began underground, lit only by torches and fear. Arya fought like a ghost herself, vanishing, striking, vanishing again. She moved through the dead like death itself. Above ground, Jaime was bleeding now, surrounded on all sides. Just as a white raised his sword toward him, Brienne appeared, cutting it down with a roar. They fought back to back, 2 knights holding the line. Jon finally reached the inner walls, trying to get Bran to safety, but it was too late. The Night King had landed. He walked slowly through the battlefield, blue eyes glowing like ice, ignoring the fire, ignoring the blood. He had one purpose, and Jon Snow was now in his path. They stared at each other, the living and the dead. Jon raised Longclaw. The final face-off had begun. Jon Snow charged first. He didn't wait for words or signals. The fire around them hissed and cracked, but he only saw the Night King calm, silent, walking straight toward him like death in a crown of frost. Longclaw clashed against the Night King's blade, a weapon of pure ice, and the shock of their impact echoed louder than the battle around them. Steel and ice rang again. Jon pressed harder. He had fought White Walkers before, but this one was different. Stronger, smarter. Jon slashed, ducked, rolled. The Night King countered every move like he had seen them all before. Above, Daenerys saw what was happening and dove Drogon toward the Night King. The fire blazed around him, but again, as before, he didn't burn. He walked through the dragon flame like it was rain. Daenerys' eyes widened. "Why doesn't he burn?" she whispered, heart pounding. On the other side of the battlefield, Jaime and Brian were being pushed back. The dead didn't tire. The living bled and gasped for air. Tormund had taken a blow to the side, but still fought like a wild beast. Even Sam was swinging wildly now, screaming more from fear than fury. In the crypts, Arya had taken a hit, blood running down her temple. She limped toward Sansa, who was cornered by 2 undead skeletons. With a cry, Arya hurled a dragonglass dagger, impaling one in the skull. Sansa fell to the ground, shaking. "I can't do this," she whispered. "You can," Arya growled, tossing her a blade. "Or you die." Sansa's hand trembled, but she held the weapon. It wasn't about bravery anymore. It was survival. Back near the Godswood, Bran still sat, eyes rolled back. He was warging deeper than ever before into the past, the present, the future. He was watching everything. Even the Night King. Even Jon. Suddenly, Bran's voice spoke, not through his own lips, but in Jon's mind. A whisper, ancient and echoing. His weakness is not rage. It's memory. Jon faltered for just a second. The Night King struck, cutting deep across his shoulder. Pain exploded in Jon's chest, but he held his ground. "Memory," Jon gasped. "What does that mean?" The Night King raised his hand again. And then something changed. From behind him, Jaime Lannister bleeding, breathless, charged with a spear tipped in dragonglass. He lunged, aiming for the back of the Night King's neck. But the Night King spun, grabbed the spear mid-air, and hurled Jaime across the field like a ragdoll. Jon tried to crawl toward him, but the Night King raised his arms again. And the dead began to rise again. All around Winterfell, the bodies that had fallen now twitched and stood. The battlefield doubled in horror. Friends, allies, brothers, they opened their eyes, now filled with icy blue light. Jon stood frozen. Then came a roar. Dragons slammed down from the sky, crashing into the field, jaws snapping. He bit down on a cluster of undead, throwing them like broken dolls. Daenerys slid off his back, landing near Jon. "I'm not leaving you," she shouted. "I have to get to Bran." Jon yelled back, already limping toward the Godswood. The Night King didn't follow. He walked slowly again, turning toward the tree where Bran sat. Daenerys looked at Jon. "Go. I'll hold them off." Jon hesitated for a heartbeat, then ran. Inside the Godswood, the trees whispered. Bran's eyes were still white, but his voice came out as Jon approached. "He's coming." Jon collapsed beside him, sword dragging in the dirt. "He won't stop." "Then neither will I," Jon replied, turning to face the path. The Night King entered the Godswood, alone. And Jon Snow stood waiting. One final time. The Godswood had fallen into silence. No screams, no fire, just cold. The Night King stepped through the trees, each foot crushing frost into the grass. The weirwood tree behind Bran stood still, blood-red leaves rustling like they knew what was about to happen. Jon Snow stood between the Night King and Bran blood dripping from his shoulder, lone claw heavy in his hand. Every breath burned in his chest, but he didn't back down. Not now. Not with everything on the line. The Night King tilted his head, those ice-blue eyes locked onto Jon's. No words. Just that awful stillness. A kind of silence that comes before a storm. And then he raised his blade. Jon struck first. He lunged with all the force he had left, Longclaw cutting a deadly arc toward the Night King's chest, but the blade was blocked with unnatural speed. Sparks flew. The Night King shoved him back, and Jon hit the ground hard. Before he could rise, the Night King raised his sword to finish it, but a shadow moved through the trees. Arya, silent as a ghost, she leapt from the dark, Valyrian steel dagger in hand, aimed straight at his back. The same dagger that once nearly killed Bran, the same one she had used to end Littlefinger. History in steel. But the Night King spun, too fast, and caught her by the throat mid-air. Her feet dangled above the snow. No! Jon screamed, forcing himself up, dragging his body toward them. Arya choked, her face turning red, dagger slipping from her hand, but she caught it with the other, and stabbed down, right into the Night King's chest. For a second nothing. Then a crack, a sharp, glassy sound. The Night King stepped back, eyes wide in the only emotion he had ever shown. Fear. His body split like frozen glass. His skin fractured, glowing blue from within, and then he exploded into ice. A wave of frost shot outward, knocking Jon and Arya back. In an instant, the White Walkers outside collapsed. White screamed and dropped like puppets with cut strings. Even Viserion, his undead dragon, let out one last roar before crashing into the earth, bones turning to dust. Silence fell again, but this time, it was real. Jon gasped for air. Arya lay beside him, coughing, covered in frost and blood. He turned to her. "You did it?" She looked at the dagger in her hand. It was steaming. "I didn't do it for glory," she said quietly. "I did it for him." She looked toward Bran. Bran opened his eyes slowly, the white fading from them. He blinked, as if returning from another lifetime. "It's over," Jon said, though he almost didn't believe it himself. Bran nodded. For now, the battle was done. But the damage was everywhere. Winterfell was nearly in ruins. Fires burned low. The living crawled out from the piles of the dead, blinking, crying, searching for those who hadn't made it. Jaime Lannister was pulled from the wreckage by Brienne, alive but broken. His arm hung uselessly. "I thought I'd die a villain," he muttered. "You didn't," Brienne said. "Not tonight." In the crypts, Sansa sat against a wall, her dress torn, a dragonglass blade still in her hand. Tyrion found her and knelt beside her. "Lady Stark," he said softly, "are you all right?" She didn't answer for a while. Then she looked up. "I saw my ancestors rise from their tombs," she whispered. "What kind of world is this?" "The one we survived?" Tyrion replied, gently helping her to her feet. Outside, Daenerys stood among her dragons. Drogon sniffed the air, confused. He roared once loud, shaking the ground. His brother, Rhaegal, flew in circles above, trying to understand the sudden quiet. Jon found Daenerys in the courtyard. "It's done," he said, but Daenerys' face was blank. "Is it?" Jon frowned. "What do you mean?" "I saw the people," she said. "They didn't cheer for me. They didn't look to me. They looked to you." Jon didn't know what to say. "You are their king, Jon Snow." "And I might have just become the spare." The fires still burned in Winterfell, but the war was over. The dead were gone. Bodies of both the living and undead lay scattered across the fields, the snow stained red and black. But inside the walls, something colder was now growing. Not from the north. From within? Daenerys stood on the battlements, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the crowd below. Survivors gathered in the courtyard. The Northmen, the Unsullied, the Dothraki, and the lords of the Vale and Riverlands. They weren't celebrating. They were waiting. Waiting for Jon Snow. When he appeared at the gates, bruised and bloodied, the silence broke into murmurs. Men nodded. Women stared. Some even bowed their heads slightly. Jon wasn't trying to take credit, but it didn't matter. To them, he was the one who stood between life and death. He was the one they trusted. And Daenerys saw it all. Tyrion approached her slowly. "They're grateful, your grace." "Not to me," she replied, her voice tight. "They look at him like he's a god." Tyrion hesitated. "He did fight beside them. He nearly died again. So did I." Her voice cracked suddenly. "I burned my enemies, lost Jorah, nearly lost Drogon, and still they see only him. Because he doesn't want the throne," Tyrion said carefully. "And maybe that's exactly why they would give it to him." Daenerys turned to him sharply. "Are you saying he should be king?" "I'm saying the realm has seen enough tyrants. If peace is to last, it has to be built, not burned." She said nothing. Down below, Jon moved among the wounded. He knelt by a dying soldier, whispering comfort. Helped a child find her father. Carried water to those who couldn't walk. He didn't do it for show, but everyone saw it anyway. And word travels fast in the north. That night, a feast was prepared, more out of duty than celebration. Bread, stew, ale, simple food for tired people. Jon sat beside Sansa and Arya, flanked by Brienne and Davos. Daenerys, dressed in black, sat alone. Tormund raised a mug. To Jon Snow, the man who faced death and won. The hall erupted in cheers. People banged cups, clapped backs, shouted praises. Daenerys didn't lift her glass. Gendry turned toward her. And to the Dragon Queen, without whom we'd all be bones, he added quickly. Polite applause followed, but it was softer, forced. She felt it deep in her gut. Later that night, as the fires died and people stumbled off to rest, Jon found her standing alone in the godswood. "You weren't at the feast long," he said. "They cheered you," she replied flatly. "They cheered all of us." "No, Jon, you just don't see it." She turned to face him. "They love you. You're one of them." "I never was. You fought for them. They don't care." Her voice trembled with emotion. "They'll never see me as more than the foreign queen with dragons. But you're their north, their blood. You're their hope." Jon didn't know how to respond. She stepped closer. "Tell me it's not true. Tell me you don't want the throne." "I don't. But if they asked you?" He looked away. That silence hurt more than words. "You think I came all this way to be forgotten?" She whispered. "To be cast aside the moment we win? I don't want power, but power wants you, Jon, and it's tearing me apart." She stepped forward, kissed him. He didn't pull away, but he didn't return it either. That was the final wound. She stepped back, eyes filled with something darker than pain. "I crossed the world to break chains," she said. "But maybe I was just forging a new one." And with that, she left him in the godswood, torn between duty, love, and a storm that was only just beginning to rise. The chill in the air was no longer from winter. It came from something deeper, unspoken words, broken trust, and power shifting like sand underfoot. Days passed since the fall of the Night King, and while Winterfell began to heal, its heart grew colder. The threat from the dead was gone, but in its place came another question. Who would rule now? Jon avoided the question. He spent his time with the survivors, helping bury the dead, rebuilding walls, even feeding the dragons. He spoke little, but the more silent he became, the louder the whispers grew. Jon Snow, the true king, a Targaryen by blood, a Stark by heart, the one who doesn't want the throne, should be the one to have it. And Daenerys heard every whisper, felt every glance. Even her unsullied loyal to the death began to sense the shift. Grey Worm remained close to her, but even he noticed that the North was turning away from their queen. One night, in the quiet of her chambers, Daenerys stared at the fire. Drogon lay nearby, watching her like a hound sensing his master's sorrow. Tyrion entered without knocking. "You shouldn't be alone," he said gently. "Am I not always alone in this land?" she replied, voice low. "I once believed you were the only one who could save us from madness," he said. "But now I wonder, who's saving you from it?" She turned sharply. "You think I'm mad? I think grief does strange things to us. I think losing trust in everyone makes monsters of us all." Daenerys stood, eyes burning. "They love Jon. You know that. I see it. You see it." Tyrion sighed. "Yes, and he's doing everything to avoid that love. But love is powerful, Daenerys. And power, when mixed with fear, it poisons everything." She clenched her jaw. "If I cannot rule with love, then I will rule with strength. And if you do," Tyrion said slowly, "you will never be queen. You'll be feared. Feared like your father was." Her eyes filled with tears. "Do you think I'm becoming like him?" "I think you're at the edge of something. And once you cross it, you never come back." The next morning, Daenerys summoned Jon to the throne room. Not King's Landing, but the seat of command she'd claimed within Winterfell. When he entered, she stood tall, armored in black and red, her crown resting on her table, not yet on her head. "We can't both exist like this," she said. "Not with the people watching us like we're enemies." "We're not enemies," Jon said, tired. "Then bend the knee, publicly," she said. "Swear loyalty before the lords of the North. End this question of who should rule." Jon looked her in the eyes. "I already did. I told you you are my queen. But do they know that? Do they believe it?" He hesitated. She stepped closer. "Please, Jon, if you love me, prove it. Let them see it. Make them stop choosing you." Jon's voice dropped. "They choose me because I don't want it. I never asked for any of this. But you have it." She snapped. "You have their hearts. And no matter what I do, I can't reach them." He looked away. "I can't be second," she whispered. "Not after everything I've lost." That night, a meeting was called with all major houses and leaders. Daenerys stood at the front. Jon stood beside her. Tyrion, Arya, Sansa, Davos, Brienne, Grey Worm, every face that mattered was present. Tension filled the air like smoke. Daenerys stepped forward. "We have won the long night, but peace will not come unless we choose one path, one ruler." She turned to Jon and waited. The room fell quiet. Jon stared at her, his heart in his throat. Then he opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Varys burst into the hall. He was supposed to be in exile. "They're coming," he said breathlessly. "Ships, a fleet from the south. The lion still roars." Cersei, she hadn't waited. She hadn't sent aid. And now, with the north weakened, she was marching north. Jon looked at Daenerys. Daenerys looked at the crowd. The war wasn't over. Not yet. And the final battle would not be against the dead. It would be against the living. Against Cersei. Against betrayal. Against destiny itself. And in that moment, as fire returned to Daenerys' eyes, Jon realized the real war had just begun.